Frank Klose every Monday. Check out 973ESPN.com for Frank's mailbag if you have questions for Frank. For next week's mailbag, at Frank Klose with a K, 973 on Twitter. We bring Frank into the conversation as a Phillies team who had their 6-game win streak snapped last night, Frank. I don't know that we would predict that at any time of this baseball season we would be talking about a team who had won 6 games in a row.
Yeah, that's quite the stretch that the team had there. Even though we knew that the starting pitching would be much more stable, you probably didn't expect that.
So with that, Michael has a question for the mailbag. He says, the Phillies have been amazing the last few weeks. Can the Phillies sustain this hot start? Can we see a team, I said, Frank, my ceiling was about 75 wins. That would, to me, was the best, that fans could expect. And if they won 75 games this year, they would be the team that everybody's writing about next year, saying, watch out for this Phillies team. They're going to be the hot team. But can they sustain this start and get to 75?
Well, some numbers suggest that they won't. If you look at their run differential, as of when I wrote the mailbag, it was negative 16, and certainly last night that you could add 7 more to that negative 16. So that tends to give you a good indication as to how a team will do over the full stretch of the season. Now, Sports Illustrated just published something last week that they used the Pythagorean winning percentage. And what it basically does is it takes that run differential and see how they compare with other teams. They have the Phillies at a .422 winning percentage, only ahead of the Padres, the Brewers, the Reds, and the Braves, which, of course, are all some of the lesser teams in the major league. So they're sort of defying odds if you look at it that way. That said, it's a little bit skewed because the Phillies had a few blowouts that were not typical. They lost one game 9-1 to the Nationals, and the next day they lost 8-1. So that accounts for a lot of that run differential. And then they had one 11-1 loss to the Mets in that opening series. So if you take out those, they're kind of hanging in there. So I don't think that they're going to be as bad as some people are saying they're going to be based on that run differential. But I don't think they're going to sustain their 600 winning percentage either.
Frank Klose has the mailbag with us here. Now, this question's been asked to a lot of people because of the start. You start to get into that month of May, and you start to think about, this team's struggling offensively. Would they consider a trade if they were in the mix? If they were really still around. Right now, I think they'd be the second wild card team. I could be wrong after last night, but they're in that mix. If they were in the mix, Frank, would they consider a trade, or are they in the kind of the situation where the Flyers were, where they were just very content with what they have?
Yeah, I think the Flyers are a good benchmark to put the Phillies against. It was very tempting this year for Ron Hextall to go and make some trades at the trading deadline, but he stood pat with the greater picture in play. And the Flyers, of course, did make the playoffs, which is quite an accomplishment in itself. I think the Phillies, they might have some success, but I think they're not going to deviate from their greater plan. So one team that this reminds me of is the Oakland Athletics in 1999. Now, they actually sold at the trading deadline, which was a little surprising to some because they had a nice winning record, but they knew that they were on the cusp of getting that big 3 starting rotation with Hudson, Mulder, and Zito, if you remember that, and Miguel Tejada was about to make the major leagues. So the A's actually sold off Kenny Rogers heading up to the trading deadline. And a lot of people were worried that they were sort of giving up. But that same Athletics team went on to win 102 games in 2001 by kind of keeping the course on their rebuild there. So I think the Phillies will probably be in the same boat as that team. I can see the Phillies getting to July while they might be doing well. I can see them trading off Jeremy Hellickson. I can see them trading off Jenmar Gomez. So I think if they can replace those players with some players from the system that might be about ready, they might have a decent enough season, and it really does set them up better for later if they can even cash in some of those assets and make some trades for the future. Now, at the same time, if there's a veteran type player that really isn't going to cost them anything except money, they might take them on. Somebody like Marlon Byrd, but not Marlon Byrd. That's like an older player that could, drive in a couple of runs. I think they might take somebody like that off of another team's hands if they just want to get through the season in a positive way. But I think they're going to keep the course here, and they're going to, even though it might seem like they're giving up on the season down the line, they really need to keep the greater picture and focus here.
Frank Klose is with us. The mailbag is open. And Frank, Mike mentioned the Flyers there. We'll say happy birthday, Ron Hextall, 52 years old today, by the way. But that's the old-timers. Let's talk players of the future a little bit. And Len wants to know, how big a prospect is Rhys Hoskins? Is he the first baseman of the future?
Yeah, for a lot of fans that don't know Rhys Hoskins, he actually just hit in his 19th straight game yesterday in Reading, which is pretty significant, even though it's Double-A. He's a first baseman. He bats right-handed. He was a 2014 draft pick in the 5th round. Remember, another certain first baseman in Philadelphia was drafted in the 5th round at one point in time. But Hoskins is rated number 20 on the Phillies prospect list on the MLB pipeline, so he's not one of their top prospects. But I think it's fair to say he's getting some attention this year at Double-A Reading. He's got 5 home runs. He now has 18 RBI. He hit one after I wrote my mailbag yesterday. But his batting average is about 256, but that looks worse than it is because he kind of started off at like a 1 for 17. But I think he's somebody that the Phillies definitely have their eye on. I think that while other positions on this Phillies team looking ahead to the future, like shortstop, you think of J.P. Crawford. If you think of the outfield, you might think of the likes of, Roman Quinn. But first base, there really is no clear front runner for who's going to take on first base. So I think you're going to get to see Hoskins. He's going to play the year out at Double-A and just kind of see what happens. I think what you're going to see with other names in the Phillies system at first base. Now, Brock Stassi was the Eastern League MVP last year at first base for the Reading Fightin' Phils. Tommy Joseph continues to impress. I think they're just going to let these guys rise to the top, and then once that they're sort of established, we'll just see what they have. So I think it's really early to anoint anybody at that position as the first baseman of the future. But I think they're just going to let these young players rise to the top and decide for them.
Hey, Frank, we saw Hector Neris get a save the other day. Gomez has been pretty good. Give us a little overview on – I was always have commented about the Phillies the last couple of years when they've struggled was, this guy in the back end of the bullpen, they never really had these – even when they were good with Lidge and Madsen, I mean, they didn't have the young electric arm in that bullpen. Give us a little overview on some of these relievers that maybe people don't know a whole heck of a lot about because we thought the bullpen would be a big weak spot. Were we wrong about that, or are these guys exceeding expectations?
Well, I can tell you I was wrong on Hector Neris for this season. I always really liked his fastball. He throws 95 miles an hour, and so when you have somebody with those tools, he's got a shot. And in terms of Neris, I probably would have had him pegged for the minor leagues to start the season. I would have kept Luis Garcia up, but give the Phillies coaching staff some credit. They really saw his pitches coming around toward the end of spring training, and they said, you know what, we're going to go with this guy. And they did, and I think it's certainly paying great dividends. Now, so Neris has a shot if he can continue to develop to be a nice arm in the bullpen. I don't know if he's going to be necessarily a closer of the future. I think if Jim Gomez gets traded and Neris is actually performing pretty well as he has been lately, he might get the opportunity to close later in the season and see what happens. But in terms of the Phillies bullpen and young relievers, I still think Elvis Araujo has some potential down the line. The lefty. I think the Phillies bullpen got better when they swapped out Daniel Stump for Elvis Araujo. Since then, they felt obligated to keep the Rule 5 pick, and now that he's suspended, it gave Araujo the time to pitch. And you can see that Pete Mackanin, he's using him in high-leverage situations in the 8th inning. So I think he's a nice piece that might have a future in this bullpen. The Phillies called up Colton Murray. I was surprised they didn't go Luis Garcia instead. They had the option to do that, and they placed Dalier Hinojosa on the disabled list. But Murray, they must see something in him. I haven't had a chance to watch him pitch much personally. He got that one out the other day, which was like a screaming line drive to Peter Borchos in right field. But I think they do think he's got some real tools there, and they want to give him a chance to see if he has them. I mean, he's 26 years old at this point, so he's getting up there in years in terms of prospects go. But I think they want to get a look at him while they still can. And then you have to look in the minor leagues. I mean, some of these starters, young starters that we're looking at, are going to end up in the bullpen just because there's no room. So I think there is a chance to have a nice young bullpen. I still wouldn't be shocked if when they're ready to contend, they go out and get a dominant closer that's already out there. That might be a free agent. But they certainly have some nice young pieces that you don't feel like the whole bullpen is just going to explode on you right now. Now, Brett Oberholzer, he's somebody I think is on thin ice, and I had higher hopes for him for this year. But after yesterday, it just seems like he really doesn't have anything. If they tried to send him to the minors, they would have to pass him through waivers to do so. We'll see if they're going to take that risk. There's probably a team out there like the Braves who drafted him, or the Cincinnati Reds that might grab him. But hopefully he comes around.
Okay, Frank, biggest question of your segment here. A cookie. You saw what happened last night when Jeremy Hellickson served up a cookie to Adam Wainwright. Mike Gill and I are having a debate on whether a cookie, I think it's a batting practice fastball. Mike says it could be an off-speed pitch or something else.
I don't really know.
We'd like to know your definition of a cookie.
I use the term meatball. When you throw a meatball, that's my version of the cookie, I guess.
Well, to me, it's when the person who's pitching just tends to mail it in and figures, it's the pitcher. He's not going to hit it anyway. So I think you fall into that trap. Oh yeah, and give Adam Wainwright some credit. I mean, he's a very talented ball player. Even with the bat, he's always had that ability. But that was a
so is it a fastball, or is it just any pitch that is basically a hanger, something that is just boom right there for the hitter?
I always thought of a cookie as a fastball down the middle, and then the talented hitter's gonna get it.
There you go, PT.
As they used to say, I groove a pitch.
Yeah, like on a tee.
Terminology.
Yeah.
The old meatball right down Broadway.
See, Gil goes meatball. Most people go cookie, but that's.
I like meatballs better than cookies.
That's not even human.
I go cookie.
All right, Frank Klose has the mailbag.
Thanks,
at 97.3ESPN.com. You can read more from Frank at Sports Talk Philly, Philadelphia.com, where all of the Phillies coverage from the guys are. And, of course, every Tuesday we answer your mailbag questions here on the Sports Bash 97.3. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, guys.